Pokemon, I think it's just the cuteness of the Pokemon, and it's such a simplistic gameplay. And with Magic, there are so many different combinations you can build.
So the first thing I think we could start with, Troy, is your origin story as it pertains to gaming, and then we'll talk a little bit about how Zia Comics came to be.
Okay, yeah. Well, the origin was with Zia Comics. We moved here from the East Coast, and we're in New Mexico, and there was not a good comic book store around. So I thought I could do it better myself and opened up Zia Comics. But then the local game store was closing down probably about a year into us opening, and all the gamers were looking for a place to play. So they approached me to host gaming there. So we branched out from comics into gaming and haven't looked back since.
Where on the East Coast did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Indiana, but then I moved around a lot with the military. I was in the Army, and then spent a lot of time in Maryland. And then when I got out of the military, I took a job at White Sands out here in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Well, thank you very much for your service, number one. And number two, what was the driving factor that got you into gaming when you were a kid?
I used to play a lot of games with my grandma, a lot of card games. The board games, you just had really the staples back then. That wasn't like it is now. You know, you could play Monopoly, but that took all day. There's a couple other smaller board games, but we played mostly cards and checkers, chess, things like that. So I got into that with my grandmother.
And at what point did you start to get the itch to decide to opening up a game store? I know that obviously comes later on down the road. Was there anything you were doing in between that led up to that point? Because you already had the interest in gaming from your grandmother. She, you know, like you mentioned, you played with her. Where in between there, from childhood to adolescence to, you know, teenage years, like when did you start to think that a game store could be a possibility?
Well, you know, in the military, we played a lot of D&D a lot of the time I was in. And when I got out, like I said, we moved here and I started a comic book store. And when they approached me, the community was real heavy into Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh card games. And that kind of, you know, Magic the Gathering kind of piqued my interest. I learned how to play that, and we started hosting all the stuff at the store. And then we started getting those people that would, you know, they would ask, hey, can you also carry this game? Can you bring this game in? And so we just expanded the gaming department from that. And now we're probably a third of the store is gaming related.
And which is the most popular currently at the store?
Well, Magic the Gathering is always a behemoth, man. You can't kill Magic. It's been around for over 20 years. Pokemon is also another huge one in the store for us. But then, you know, you got the board games that are come go. They'll be popular for a few years, and then another one will come and take its place. But it seems like the TCGs, the main ones, is Magic and Pokemon are holding it down for card games. Yeah. The board games it changes from year to year.
In your opinion, do you think game stores would be able to exist without, say, for example, you know, that TCGs were the way of how board games are, like you're saying? Do you think game stores would be able to still function if, like, you know, board games were the only true option?
I think so. A lot of stores would probably have to change their marketing. Right now, we probably sell more board games than we do TCGs. Every Saturday, we have a free game night, and we call him our game guru. He comes in and he picks 3 games. You know, a kid's game, an adult cooperative game, and then just a normal game. And those are the 3 he focuses on teaching to people that night. And then, you know, if you come in that night and you demo any of those games, you can get a discount on them buying them that night. And we average anywhere from 15 to 20 people on game night for a small town. That's pretty good. So yeah, I do believe they could survive without the TCGs. you're just going to have to pivot your marketing instead of being tournament driven like with Magic and stuff. You're just going to have to change your marketing. But yeah, it can be done, and there are stores that do it. There are stores out there who don't carry TCGs; they're board game only. And then you get your hybrid board game cafes. There's just so many different things you can do with it. It's all just how you present it to the community.
What is the volatility as it pertains to board games? What do you see there that makes, it always changing, as you said?
Well, everybody wants the new hotness. I mean, a new game comes out and they hear about it and they want it. And a lot of times, if that game manufacturer did not prepare for it to be as big as it is, they might not have enough of it in print, which causes a big scarcity for it. But if it takes them too long to get that reprint out, people sometimes will lose interest and move on to the next hot game. So, I mean, it takes a lot of planning. You've got to make sure your game is good, that it hits the hotness scale and that you have it available for people.
And availability, that when you think about that from a distributor standpoint and being able to acquire those games, because I know with Magic, I've talked about it on the podcast before, you'll have your allocations related to a particular game. But from a board game standpoint, I'm not as familiar with the inner workings of that. I know, like, for example, Magic the Gathering, as we mentioned, is, obviously the most popular game going right now. And they'll have their allocation that they'll give to the stores. The size of the store can be a factor in terms of how much product you get. But from the flip side of that, with the board games, when we get out of TCGs, how does that work in terms of making sure you have that product available?
Well, a lot of times you don't see allocations on board games like you do with Pokemon and Magic the Gathering, but you run into bottlenecks in distribution with board games. I mean, I don't want to throw any game under the bus, but there was a certain bird-related board game that came out, and their distribution was messed up for years and years. It was a hot game, but game stores couldn't get it. But there was, like, Bed Bath & Beyond would have the game on their end caps because somehow their distribution was so messed up. So you had people coming to, game stores looking for this game. They couldn't get it, but then they'll tell you, well, I just saw it down at Ace Hardware. Why would I keep coming back to you guys if you can't get these games? So, the distributor, the manufacturers, I should say, should really think long and hard on their distribution, because that can make or break a game. If you can't get it in the hands of the people who are looking for it, they'll move on to the next hot game.
And with what you mentioned about Magic being the most popular, how do you decide from your standpoint in terms of what you're going to order, knowing the popularity of Magic and Pokemon, and then having to deal with the volatility that can be had with board games? How is your process determined in terms of, like, okay, I need this amount of this game, and then when it comes to another one, you may order less? I'm curious your thought process when you're trying to flesh that out.
Luckily, my employees are really big into the games too, so they'll let me know when a certain set is going to be hotter than normal. But sometimes you get completely surprised. Something will come out and something happens, or they'll ban a certain card, which will make another card better. And but for the most part, I listen to the players and my employees as to what I can get, and then, of course, that goes up against my allocations with distributors.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. It's always good to have the employees to lean on for that type of thing. How many employees do you currently employ at the store?
Well, I have two stores. I have 4 at one store and 2 at the other.
And what's that like, managing multiple locations? Because I would imagine in the early days when you had the first store, that's a big task in and of itself, getting into retail, the overhead, the amount of time you have to put in. Did you feel the second store was easier to do, or do you feel it's just as, the challenges involved are just as the same as having one compared to 2?
The challenges are the same and they're just as hard. but now this time I was prepared for them. I knew these challenges were coming. Didn't make it any easier, but I wasn't taken by surprise. And the other store is an hour away. So that, that distance makes it a little difficult as well. I can't be at both stores all the time because of the commute.
Right, right. And how long was the first store running before you opened the next one?
About 10 years.
10 years. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've had a lot of knowledge gained from that very first time. What was your biggest lesson you'd say you learned from those first 10 years?
No matter what a contractor tells you for a deadline, they're not going to hit it. And whenever you're dealing with the city, don't expect it to move quickly. Those are the two big things.
And so then you learned that, and now with going into the next store, did those same issues come up? Because I know you said you had already knew what to expect at that point. Was there any knowledge from that since you knew what to expect, like you knew how to deal with it rather than, probably the surprise it was the very first go around?
Well, I expected it, and it still got caught up working with the city. There's no matter what anybody tells you, there's so many things you have to do with the city, and I like I said, I don't want to throw people under the bus, but working with any city, it's not just one. Every city I've worked with, and there's 4 or 5, it's always been the same thing that, nobody knows the whole answer, or somebody's telling you the wrong answer. So it takes a lot of fleshing out and tracking things down at City Hall to get the correct paperwork, the right forms. That you got to have so many inspections, and and we still and expect that. I even pushed our open date because I figured it was going to have a lot of problems, and I ended up having to push it again because of delays from contractors and city.
I can imagine that being incredibly frustrating too, even though you had already went through it once before.
Yep.
Is there a style you went with in regards to configuring the store the first go around compared to the second one? So what I mean by that is, how you mentioned there were obviously cafes, like where the stores have a cafe inside the store. Maybe this store number one was specifically TCGs, and then the other one mixes both TCGs and board games. In terms of with that in mind, did you have any particular thought process in terms of how you wanted to configure the store, and then what you did for the second?
Well, like I said, when we first opened, we were a comic book store. Then we morphed into including games. Then we moved to a bigger location, and then we started expanding more, and we got into some model building. We have an arcade in the back. We got into Warhammer with a miniature wargaming. So, I mean, it's constantly changing. We don't have any set thing. If something is, performing really well, we'll bring it in and modify the store to fit it. And if something is declining and dying off, we'll make sure to get rid of it and make room for whatever is coming out that is going to fill that void.
Are comics something that you're still doing in the store?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we sell a lot of comics.
And is it mostly newer comics, or is it back issues, or both?
It's both, and trade paperbacks, omnis, everything comic related.
And it's nice to see a store that offers both the gaming and the comics. I don't see that all the time with stores. I know a lot of them may have had comics at one point and then they pulled back from it. What's been your reason to keep it going? I know that's how the store started. Is that the ultimate reason why you continue to go that way, or is the clientele really expecting it, having it been in the area for so long?
We still get quite a few people coming in looking just for comics, or at least that's why they walk in the door. And, after a third or fourth visit, they start seeing these guys playing games over there, and they start to get that interest. So there's some bleed over from the comic fans over into the gaming fans. And, the new comics, there's a razor thin margin on those, but the older comics is where you're going to make your money. Usually have a lot better margin on the older comics, but everybody, like I said, everybody's coming in wanting the new stuff. So I don't know. if the comics ever stopped making money for us, I would probably look at downsizing it or just dropping it altogether. But that hasn't happened yet.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, it's very, I like your approach where you seem to be able to get rid of something pretty easily if it's not working. Like, you don't allow the emotion of, even if it was something you really loved, you don't let the emotion take control over when making a business decision. Have you always had that skill, that ability to just look at it black and white and just be like, this isn't working or this is working, and then make a decision based off that?
It's tough, but yeah, I mean, we've always looked at it that way. It's, everything in there, how they look at retail is every square foot should be making you money. You don't want to have just empty space that's not doing anything for you. So I look at it as every genre of a product we have in there needs to earn its keep. So if it stops making the money to pay for itself, then I need to look at it. First, is it something we're doing wrong, not selling it? Is it something the way it's displayed? You try a couple different things, and if no matter what you do to try to increase the sales on it, it's not working, then it's time to look at, possibly cutting the line on that one.
What's something that you could share as an example that didn't work, that either it took some time to realize it wasn't working, or something that, you noticed right away wasn't working?
Not a whole lot, really. Mostly with TCGs, there's always a new TCG coming out, and everybody is always telling you it's the new Magic. And, you carry it for a while and everybody's hot on it for a year or two, and then inevitably it's going to drop. So far, none of them have had the staying power that Magic and Pokemon have had. So, you look at them, like your Flesh and Bloods and other games like that, and when they start to lose interest and stop selling, you need to stop bringing them in, or you're just wasting money.
What do you think is the reason that no other TCG has been able to produce the staying power that Magic and Pokemon can sustain?
If I had that answer, I'd make my own TCG. I don't know. Pokemon, I think it's just the cuteness of the Pokemon, and it's such a simplistic gameplay. And with Magic, there are so many different combinations you can build a deck around, and with the mechanics working with each other, there's more variations in a Magic deck than there is in chess, probably. So, if you're big into strategy, you're going to love Magic. If you just like, playing the TCG, then without having to have a whole lot of cerebral thought going into it, you might be better off with Pokemon. And all these other games, I think maybe they're not doing anything unique. They're kind of copying what these other TCGs are doing, and it kind of gets old hat after a while, and people drop those new games and go back to Magic.
And when you look at your store, are there any of the, I guess we can call them tertiary games like Lorcana or Flesh and Blood, just since they're not in the top two like Magic and Pokemon are, that you notice you feel have legs at your store, that, you're getting consistent people showing up to events at either location?
We've had off and on, we had games like that. We had, was it Kaiju? Wizard of the Coast put one out, the Kaiju one, and it did really well for us for a long time. Then Wizards cut that one with no explanation. Then we started playing, they played Keyforge a lot. And Keyforge was kind of unique, but you got to have the people in the store to champion it, or have one of your employees to champion it, because we noticed when we opened our new store, the guy who was huge into Keyforge, he went to be the manager at the new store, and we saw a huge drop off on Keyforge. So if you don't have somebody there who's going to promote it and explain people how it works, and that's a big thing too. You want to be able to tell people how these games play. Otherwise, they're going to look and say, I don't know if I want to spend $30-$40 on this game, and find out that I don't like it.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. It's one of those things, then you're putting money into something that may not be profitable for you. With the employees at the store, I know you mentioned how many work at each one. Do you give them any specific roles that you need them to do, or is their primary responsibility, involve customer service, helping people get cards, whatever they may need? Because being, having two stores, you're a larger operation than a traditional one store, smaller location. So I was curious how you handle operations on your side.
Well, we don't sell singles. We stopped selling singles years ago. It was a huge time suck, and we noticed, and people, all they want to do is argue about card quality. Oh, well, you're selling this as near mint, it's not near mint, or lightly played and it's not. And we looked at the time spent pulling the cards, because we had a pretty extensive database of cards. The time they spent pulling these cards to sell to people, and then people would inevitably get up there and they'd kick some of them back and went and buy them. And, and these guys could have spent their time doing inventory or helping somebody else rather than selling these $3 worth of cards that this person pulled. So we cut singles altogether. All of the employees, they wear, we don't have, I like to say, I have 4 managers at the one store and 2 at the other. They're all managers. They all can do anything in the store. They know, they can probably explain 90% of the games off the top of their head. They keep up to date on all the stuff going on in the comics. And then on top of that, they do all the cleaning and the inventory, and the customer service, like you said. So, I really don't like to call them the point. They're all managers that I get, because I want them all to do the same high level of work.
And what does your day-to-day look like these days with having people, running the operations for the most part?
I do a lot of paperwork, a lot of admin stuff. I also run a couple of Comic Cons, and so I'm spending most of my time on the phone with agents for the cons, or venues, or planning stuff for in-stores. We have a lot of in-store events, a lot of in-store signings. I try to get into each store as much as I can. The local one, I get in there a couple times a week, and I try to go like every 2 weeks to the one that's an hour away, just to keep up on what's going on at those stores. So, but most of my work is done right here, where you see in front of this keyboard, doing admin paperwork.
So you mentioned conventions is one of the things that you handle. Are you guys vending a lot at these conventions? Are you going for networking purposes? What is your relationship with the convention scene?
I own them. I own the ones here and run them. El Paso Comic Con, Anime El Paso, El Paso Horror Fest.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. So how long have you been doing that for?
Well, we used to do Las Cruces Comic Con, and we had end up ending that one. We did that one for about, since 2017, or 2014. In 2017, we started doing El Paso Comic Con, and Horror Fest and Anime we've done about 3 or 4 years now.
So it's almost a second business in addition to Zia Comics.
Oh, it is. It definitely is.
And what would you say has been the biggest learning point from that? Since you're the first store I've talked to that also, I mean, most stores I've talked to go to conventions to vend. You're the first store I've talked to that owns conventions. So that is quite the dynamic. I mean, I'm guessing having the managers at your existing locations has freed up the time for you to put all your efforts into the conventions. So what has that been like for you? Like from the first one that you started to now, what have you gathered along the way?
There are a lot of hidden costs in running events. People don't realize is more than just renting the venue. I mean, you got to bring in your guests, which means you have to pay their travel, their hotel, usually a per diem. They work off of a guarantee, which says if they come to this event, you guarantee they'll make at least this amount of money. If they fall short, then I have to make that up. So, it's a lot of contracts with a lot of different entities with the cons.
It's quite fascinating to hear, because I couldn't even imagine, taking up a project of that scale. Have you seen your growth with those? I mean, because you have several of them, so it's clear you've done well with them. Have you increased the venue size each year, or do you keep them fairly small and intimate, or is it something that some of them have taken off to where you're going into much larger venue spaces?
Well, we really only have the one venue space. We started out small. We wanted to make it sustainable. So we started out only taking one of the halls, then we expanded to two. Then a couple years later, we got all three. And then we would add other parts of the convention center. But right now, we're using every square inch that's available in that convention center. So we're kind of hoping they do an expansion because we're going to need more room soon. But yeah, I mean, we even with the new ones we started, Anime and Horror Fest, we start them small and try to build them from there so we can keep it sustainable.
What types of things are you doing at these events? Are you doing, the traditional, you have vendors, you have panels and things like that? Like what's like the unique selling proposition that you're putting into these various events?
Well, there's not another one, close by. It helps. We bring in the celebrities. There's photo ops, like you said, panels. Past couple years, we've had a 915 Echoes of Horror has done they did a haunted house for Horror Fest, and for Epcon coming up in April, they're going to do a Arkham Escape type horror type. You're escaping the villains of Arkham. We bring in, pop culture cars like the Batmobile, the Supernatural Impala, cars like that. We're bringing in Lucha League Wrestling. So they're going to be doing a couple matches during the weekend, and they're going to teach kids how they can do the wrestling moves safely without hurting each other. We try to do something for everybody in the family. Dad can come look at the cars, mom can go look at the celebrities, the kids can go watch wrestling or the voice actors from the anime stuff. So it's just you try to cover all the genres that you can.
I find it fascinating how detailed you are with it too. All the things that you're thinking about to appeal to various audiences in one convention. The thing that immediately crosses my mind in terms of what is potentially the most difficult, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, I could just imagine trying to get celebrities which utilize a draw to get people to the show and having to deal with the agents. That seems to me like it would be the most complex part. Is that the case, or is there something even more so than that?
That's a pretty difficult part too, especially when there are so many cons going on now that on your weekend there could be 4 or 5 other big cons going on, so you're all competing for that those popular guests. Of course, the guest is likely going to go to the one that's the biggest and has the biggest draw for them, but and then you have to negotiate with them. Like I said, they have guarantees, travel, hotel, per diems. It's a lot. And then a lot of times, they can cancel. It's a clause in there. If they get called out to do professional work, like a movie pops up, they can cancel their con appearance to go do that movie. And I mean, I don't blame them. I would go do a movie over a con also. But then the attendees get upset, and then you're struggling to try to find a replacement on, last minute. So it's the celebrities are a big part of it. But I always say that a successful event is it's like a tripod. You have 3 legs, and they all have to be strong. Your attendees, your vendors, and your guests, and all 3 of those have to be happy. Because if one of them's not, the whole thing's going to topple.
We're going to take a quick break from this podcast to talk about our sponsor, Cardboard Shuffle. Cardboard Shuffle was our 10th podcast interview here at the Match Slip with store owner Mark. Mark has expanded his brand and has produced his own card sleeves called Shuffle Shields. Shuffle Shields come in packs of 100 premium matte card sleeves for standard size trading cards. They contain no PVC and are acid-free. I have 17 packs of Shuffle Shields card sleeves to give away to listeners of the podcast, and to receive your free pack of Shuffle Shields, you'll need to send a screenshot that you're following Cardboard Shuffle on Facebook to frank@thematchslip.com.
And this question I'm going to ask you, I'm sure is probably self-explanatory. I would imagine by the end of these conventions, after you've set up everything, they're running, you must feel like a sigh of relief and exhaustion.
Not until the Monday afterwards. That's
okay.
Yeah, when it's all over and nobody got hurt, nothing bad happened, that's when I breathe a sigh of relief.
And then is it just planning for the next set of events, or do you then also put some focus on the stores at that point? Because it almost would seem like to run an event, you have to put your full focus.
I'm usually doing 2 or 3 things at once, especially with the marketing. Like this morning, I ran marketing for both stores, and and a little bit for the con. I'm going to be doing a little bit more marketing later today. I'm after we get off here, I'm going to go to the store and check on them. So, I mean, I'm always multitasking. It's never just one thing, because when I'm driving to the store, I'm either talking to an agent or I'm, emailing somebody about something at the event. So it's always multiple things going on at the same time.
Almost like it's a 24/7 thing. Like it's just
It is
constant.
Yes, it is.
How do you carve out the time for yourself?
I usually don't. Usually, on a weekend, I'll take a Saturday or Sunday off to do stuff around the house, or we'll go and check out something local, a local event. And whenever I can, usually toward the end of the year when we kind of have some dead time, we do a little bit of traveling overseas.
I'm sure you must enjoy what you're doing, because I wouldn't believe you'd put yourself through how much hours and work is involved if you didn't love it.
It depends on what day of the week you ask me. Sometimes I love it, and sometimes I'm ready to get rid of it all.
What would you say is, if you were to pick like one thing, and I know it might be hard to do, but if you were to pick something as the most challenging thing of having both a game store business and a convention, like what is the thing that's the most challenging? And then on the flip side, what's been the most rewarding for you?
The challenging thing is you just don't have enough time to do everything you want at both, at the conventions and at the stores. So you end up having to do a lot of hard prioritizing, what absolutely has to get done, put that at the beginning of the list. And sometimes, the stuff that gets put at the end of the list, it falls off or gets pushed back a month or two. I almost wish I could clone myself so I can get all the stuff done that I need to get done. But the most rewarding thing at the store and with the cons is just seeing the people enjoy themselves with what you've provided them. You want the people to leave happy.
And that's like the ultimate reward, I would imagine. It's basically you're seeing your work come together, and what's the payoff from that?
Exactly.
If we switch a little bit to the store itself, are there any thoughts, like because you're clearly growing and doing well, is there any thoughts about like needing a third location at any point, or is that still like off?
No, we've thought about it. I mean, we looked for a couple years before we opened the second location, because I don't want to open in a place where there's already 5 or 6 different stores open that are all competing for that little piece of the pie. I want to go to some place where it's underserved and the people will really appreciate it. And it gives you a lot more freedom to try different things rather than worrying about, I've got to drop my prices on this because next door they're selling theirs. We go, like Las Cruces didn't have a comic book store until we opened. Alamogordo didn't have one until we opened. So we look for places like that where the population can support it, but yet they still don't have it.
And how do you determine which location needs one? Like you mentioned, you took a couple of years to find the second location. What is the process to finding an underserved market that you notice doesn't need something? What is your process to determine what's viable?
Well, seeing if there's one, something similar in the area, that's the easy part. But you also need to look at the population, the demographics, their age ranges, their median income. You go to that city as much as you can and kind of see what they already have, what they're looking for. And you can tell when something that they like happens, they show up in droves for it. And we noticed that in Alamogordo. Every time we went there, anytime anything nerdy was going on, people just showed up like crazy. So that told us, they have the population, they have the income, and they are obviously, hungering for some nerdy entertainment. So that's why we decided. Then you got to find a place with a good location. You don't want to be out in the middle of nowhere. So you want to be, central as you can be with good parking, good lighting, So, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. That's why we looked at 3 or 4 different cities before, for a couple of years before we picked Alamogordo.
How did the name come about? What does the name mean? Like Zia?
It's Zia in the southwest of New Mexico. It's I don't know if you've seen it. It's the little circle sun thingy with the 3 stripes coming off of all 4 directions.
Oh, okay.
It's I believe it's an Apache Indian design, but everything down here is named Zia. And my wife went to get the business license while I was at work, because I was actually still working at the time, and she couldn't think of anything. That's the first thing that popped in her mind, so she just said Zia Comics, and it's just stuck.
Oh wow! So it was. I always like hearing those backstories, because sometimes it's elaborate and sometimes just spur of the moment, like you just described there. So that's cool. And you said you were working beforehand. So did you have a separate like full-time job before Zia Comics became your full-time thing?
Yeah, I was subcontracted with NASA out at White Sands Complex.
Oh, cool.
For several years, and I worked still out there for the first couple years we were open, and we had my wife would work the daytime, the morning time, and then we had an employee that worked a couple hours, and then after work I would come and finish up and close. So I got no sleep.
I was going to say those must have been really long days.
They were extremely long.
What was the point in time you realized I could switch to this full time?
It was probably actually when Obama got elected and everybody got health care, because the main reason I was staying on was for health care.
Okay.
So when anybody could get health care, and you didn't have to go through an employer to be able to afford it, that's when I put in my notice and told them I'm done.
And how many years have you been doing the store full time at this point?
Probably since 2012, 13 years.
It's a long time. And so, I mean, you figure with everything you've been doing with the store, you've been in it now for quite some time. Is there anything that you think, that if you were starting this now, is there something you would impart on someone that's starting a game store for the first time?
I mean, you can give them general knowledge, but honestly, every city, every location is different. I were friends with quite a few other game store owners, and one of them is just less than an hour away in El Paso, and their demographic is things that will work for me up here won't work for them down there, and vice versa. So you really got to go in kind of general and then fill out your community and get in touch with what they want and need. So every location is going to be different, but the general stuff, it's just general business stuff.
Is there anything from like a marketing standpoint that you have to do to get the name out about the store? I mean, 2 locations, you pretty much have an established name at this point, and to get to that point, you're clearly, known in the area. But, as any business, you're always looking to grow. So I was curious if there's anything that you do, or if on the flip side of that, if the conventions kind of serve as a throughput back to the game stores.
Well, we always put ourselves down as sponsors of the cons, so that part helps for marketing. Marketing changes all the time. When we first started, print media was still pretty good, but now print media does not translate to sales for us at all. Then radio did well for a while. Now radio is kind of with everybody using Pandora and Spotify and streaming online. The radio stuff is the ROI on that has been dropping like crazy. We've always pushed pretty heavy into social media, but even in social media, the platforms that people are on changes all the time, because Facebook now, the young kids have moved away from Facebook to Instagram or Snapchat and some of the other TikTok stuff. So Facebook is more of the older crowd, and you just kind of gear your advertising to that audience. I mean, if you put out something that is made an advertisement made for young kids and put it out on Facebook, you're not going to get as good a response with that as you would with that same ad on Instagram, because the audiences are different. So you just really have to keep up on where your audience is, so you can keep putting yourself in front of them no matter where they're at.
And with all those constant changes, how do you, I mean, because you clearly are comfortable in the amount of hours that it requires to put in, and you enjoy it. And so, how do you deal with the days where the overwhelm comes in, or, every day is not going to be perfect? So, how are you able to create that balance for yourself? Is there something like that you always look back to that, kind of resets? Because running your own business in a general sense, outside of having multiple locations and a separate convention business on top of it, can seem like more like than one person can handle by themselves. But you have a good grasp on all of this. So how do you handle the days of overwhelm? Like, what is your approach for that?
Well, it's like you mentioned earlier, you have to take some time off every once in a while, or you're gonna lose it. We try to go to other events as well. I don't try to reinvent the wheel. If we go to events and I see something, how they're running something, and I like it, I try to implement it. Or if I see something they're doing that I think is completely backwards, I will remember that and remember not to do it myself. So, I mean, we try to cherry pick the best parts of other events that we see and try to implement them into our cons if we can.
And I know you mentioned earlier that you actually have, you do go to both stores, not every day, obviously, but what is your job when you're there? I know you mentioned checking in, but what are like some of the things? I'm sure when you're going there, you do have like in your mind some tasks you want to do whenever you're visiting the store.
Well, I always go and I make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. You got to keep them honest. You make sure all the vending machines are being filled, that, all the stocks all stock is being put out on the shelves, that they're doing the cleaning and dusting. I'm grabbing all the inventory paperwork that they've gotten, so I can let the distributors know what we've received that's damaged or stuff that's missing. Then just generally listening to the employees, to hear what's going on with them, so that I know that they're still doing well, but also that I don't allow anybody to mistreat our employees either. I would rather lose a customer than a good employee. Some of the entitled customers that come in, we let them know that won't be tolerated. So I hear them talking about this, so I know what customer to look out for, to kind of pull them to the side and say, look, what you're doing is not going to work. You either need to change or shop somewhere else. But yeah, most of the time it's just me going in and checking to make sure everything's running good, that all the inventory's out where it should be, everything's clean, get my paperwork, make sure that the safe has got the change in it that they need for the week, and that's it.
And as you were talking, Troy, one of the skills I've noticed you have, which is very difficult, for people in business, especially if they're starting out, and even depending upon how deep into it they are, is your ability to hand off responsibility to your store managers, let them do their thing so you could do your thing. Were you always comfortable with being able to let go and allow them to do it? Because I know you do the check-in to make sure things are still going, but you're still giving them that leeway to run things in a way that they see best to cater to the customers that are coming in to play games and to shop. Was that something you were doing early on? You just naturally knew you could alleviate responsibility without having to be looking over the top of them all the time?
I'm still not comfortable with it. I had to force myself. I know that, and they would like me to give them even more more leeway, but I'm a very hands-on person, and it's hard for me to let go. It took me 10 years to let them go to this point. It's just I like to see what's going on and know what's going on. I don't like to be caught unaware of things.
Right.
But they're, the employees we have now, they're really good at, we're always on text with each other or Facebook Messenger. So they're always letting me know what's going on, if anything needs to be done at the store. So I feel a little better about letting them do these things, by themselves, and I know I need to give them more leeway, and maybe in another 10 years I will.
What would you say is the most difficult thing to give up? Because you said it took 10 years. So I'm curious, what is, since you like to be involved in and you enjoy it, what is the most difficult thing to give up that you were like, all right, I have to let this go?
Probably ordering inventory. That took a while for me to let go, and I still order all the comic books myself, but everything else I let them, do orders if they need stuff. But I've been talking to them about letting go of the comic book ordering too, and letting them do it. But I know what a pain it is. So I always want to make sure that that's right, because if somebody doesn't have the book they want in their subscription, they're not very understanding about it. And we usually get an earful about it. And, we've had more than one person quit because they didn't get the book they wanted, even though it was no fault of our own. The distributor would delay it a week or something, but, they swear up and down it's our fault. So they just cut their subscription. It's things like that. I would rather do it myself so that I can blame myself and not blame them. I don't want to blame them. So that's why I have a hard time letting go of the ordering.
Is there any aspect of the ordering where the nervous part of giving that up? I mean, because I'm even just thinking of myself. If I was in your shoes, what would make me nervous about giving up the ordering is the potential for over ordering or under ordering of a product. And, either you're spending too much money or you're not having the product there that needs to be in place for, like you were mentioning, like a subscription order.
Well, I've always told them it's better to err on the conservative side. If we sell out and we don't have any more, we didn't lose any money. But if we order way too much and it's just sitting on the shelf, that's money that's tied up that I can't use to buy other new inventory. But they're usually pretty good, because the POS system that we have, you can go in and you can see historically how things have sold or how similar games or comics have sold. So, you can do a little research and you can get a pretty good guesstimate of what's going to sell.
That's good to know. I mean, I have talked to other stores about this concept of what to order and what not to order. And I know in a lot of cases I've heard, it's looking at past orders made, feedback from the community. But I really like the process you have with using the point of sale system as a reference guide. Was that always in place, or was that something just from your experience you were able to put in place for over time?
We picked up a POS system, I think, in our second year. So we've got data going back all the way, except for that first year.
Wow.
And, whenever I ask them, hey, what do you think about this new game? Every once in a while, one of them will say, well, we had something like that before and it didn't sell well. So, well, let's look. We'll pull up the report. They were dead wrong. They remembered it. It was the Mandela effect. They remembered it wrong because whatever it was, it actually sold well. And then you show them that and they're like, oh, yeah, I must have been thinking about something else. That's why you run the report. And that POS system has saved us a few times.
That's great. That's really good to hear. I mean, nothing helps better than having the data, right?
Yeah. Numbers are irrefutable.
Without a doubt. And so when we look at like the future of the store, is there anything in particular you'd like to see happen down the line? It could be something that's, a grandiose plan that you've been thinking about for a while, or it could be something in the near future that is going to happen. Is there anything you've been kind of sitting on?
Not really. We're looking at we're branching out into a couple other areas outside of the comics and conventions. So a lot of our efforts go in there, and we have a pretty big store. It's about 8,000 square feet, but it's still pretty full. And right now, I can't think of anything that I would want to change or add to it. But new things pop up all the time, so. Anything's possible. Right now, though, we're just trying to maintain the status quo and keep everything running smooth.
And it's okay if you can't, but is there anything you could talk about some of the other things you're looking to add that you were alluding to?
Well, in Alamogordo, where our second store is, we bought an old movie theater that we're looking to renovate into an esports type thing, and also show independent films, meet the cast of these films, things like that. And we're also looking at opening a bar in Alamogordo.
That sounds like a blast. I mean, would it be separate, built like separate building spaces next to each other? Okay.
Yeah, we already have the buildings. We just have to renovate them.
Oh, wow. So are they right next to each other?
They're all within a block of each other on the main road.
That's phenomenal. That's just another thing that you have to oversee.
Exactly.
But it's got to be, though, I would imagine it must be very rewarding to see, all the work that you've put in, it lead to these other opportunities. I mean, is it one of those things like sometimes you have to step back and be like, wow.
Yeah. Then there's times when I had to step back and stop myself from doing things because I love the idea, and then I had to step back and think, do I actually have the time to do this?
Right.
and sometimes it's no.
Is there anything that you could share like that was like something, even if it was grandiose? I'm curious, like where your mind has went to with it, where you're like, I really want to do this.
Well, my mind is all over the place. It's usually whenever, like I said, I don't reinvent the wheel. I see what's working for other people, and then I look and like places like Alamogordo doesn't have it. So, hey, I know it would work here. Yeah, there's tons of ideas, and usually my ideas I'll remember. If I don't write them down, I'll forget them in 10 minutes. So I have notes laying everywhere around here you can't see, and a lot of times, and if it's a good idea, usually it'll come back to me, or I'll see something to remind me. But it's like every time I see something, I get another idea. So I can't pinpoint just one.
Right, it's constantly always churning the ideas. Right. I'd imagine
it is.
So as we wrap up here, Troy, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. The final question I have for you is if you can give people a visual, walkthrough, I guess, of your store, entering it for the first time. You could choose either location, whichever one you'd prefer as the showcase for it. But if you could describe what people would see as they walk into your store.
Well, in Cruces, which is our bigger store, it's right on Main Street, right across the street from the plaza, where they have a whole bunch of events, which, most of the time it helps us. There's some bleed over for the events that people will come to the store and check things out. But we have a fenced in area for people to sit, because we also have hand dipped ice cream, so they can get some ice cream and sit out there and people watch the event if there's an event going on. You go further in, you got board games on the right. You go down, you'll see the cashier app, and that's where we have a huge line of TCGs. We try to carry all the Magic that we can, going back as far as we can, and Pokemon. Plus, we got you go to the right, and then there's going to be a game room / anime room. That's where all of our manga and anime stuff is in there, statues, books, what have you. You come back out of that room, it's our miniatures wall. We have a huge, probably 15-foot section of just nothing but miniatures up and down the wall. Full line of paints. Then right next to that, we have the vintage comics, the old stuff. Go to the left, and that's where your new comics are. In the back, we have all the action figures and Funko Pops. Then we have a separate room in the back for the Warhammer stuff. It's slam full of Warhammer. The other one is a bunch of other model kit type stuff, like your Gundam and things like that. And then next to that is our arcade room. We probably have 10 or so pinballs and a few arcades in there.
That's really cool.
Yeah, then it's my office. You don't need to see my office.
Well, that's excellent. Well, Troy, since we're at the end here, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to share with people where they could find out more about Zia Comics if they're in the New Mexico area.
Well, short of stopping in the store, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We got our own website, ziacomics.com. And we try to sponsor as many local type events as we can, or hold in-store events.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Troy, once again for coming on the show. It's been a blast.
Thank you. My pleasure.